Western Mass News 11 at 11.
Developing news tonight, an alleged incident involving multiple juveniles at Frontier Regional School in Deerfield. Good Tuesday evening and welcome to Western Mass News 11 at 11. I'm Chris Pisano. Tonight, parents and educators are speaking up about the school's alleged response and what changes they want to see happen. Western Mass News reporter Matt Price live for us now in studio with more. Matt, what can you share?
Well, Chris, before we get into these reactions, we have to make very clear to our viewers that we cannot explain all the details due to the ages of those involved. That said, there is outrage and frustration from parents and educators who want Frontier Regional School to do better to keep students safe.
To approve the Frontier calendar.
It was a very emotional Tuesday evening at Frontier Regional School. Parents and educators speaking directly to the school committee after an alleged very serious incident unfolded in early March. And while there is anger, sadness, and frustration about the details, it is the school's alleged response that has sparked outrage.
I emailed a month ago the admin, and I asked what they were going to do for families, what they were going to do for students, counseling, and the response was they would not be putting out a statement due to privacy issues, and they would have counselors available. They don't have enough counselors.
According to those who made remarks and spoke directly to Western Mass News after the meeting, they say the administration did not take appropriate measures to keep the community informed that something had happened. In addition, longtime educator Sean Durrett, who is also a member of the Deerfield Inclusion Group, says victims affected by this alleged incident, as well as other students, have not had an easy time since the incident was reported.
Rumors, gossip, and, talk is running rampant in the district, and it's the role of educators and the administration to lead a response by trained and caring individuals who are adults.
Lots of emotions were on display during the meeting. In fact, after public comment had ended, the committee's chair was close to shedding tears.
The perspective that we are committed to making sure that this school is a safe space for the kids.
The alleged incident hit close to home for parent Lou Vincent, who had a similar experience during her high school years. She says more needs to be done to better address what is going on.
This is a time frame where our children should be uplifted and celebrated in every way, every sexuality, every gender. And to have silence around any kind of assault or any kind of bullying is just simply promoting a kind of meanness that we don't want to live with anymore.
Others we spoke with agreed, saying there are resources the school and the district should take into consideration.
There was a great suggestion tonight to talk more about Title IX and how the Title IX coordinator, what their responsibilities are, how students and families learn about that, where that information can be found in the website.
Bring in professional crisis counselors, help them make better policy, reach out to students, hold assemblies. They've held assemblies in the past for other things. Cyberbullying was last year, and nothing for this incident, which is crazy.
We have reached out to the Northwestern DA's office for comment on this matter, but we have not yet heard back. And because this alleged incident involves juveniles, Frontier Regional School and Deerfield Police tell us they are unable to speak about this in accordance with Massachusetts law. Stick with us both on air and online as we continue to follow the latest on this alleged serious incident at Frontier Regional School. For now, reporting live in the studio, Matt Price, Western Mass News.